This is Rabbi Chaim Brovender Parsha Shiur, the WebYeshiva, and we're going to learn something about the parshat Shoftim, Tafshin Pei. The topic that we're going to look into is the connection or lack of connection between the notion of milchama, of going to war, and shalom, and peace, which is presented in the Torah and other sources as being contradictory. Either you go to milchama or you go to shalom. In fact, halachically, just by way of introduction, you remember that the halacha divides up war into reshut and chova, an optional war and a necessary war. And the necessary war is either as a result of a tzivui, of a direct command from heaven that you should go to war. Like when Yoshua came to Eretz Canaan, he was living with a command to do away with the people who lived there, to get rid of idolatry, the idolatry that was connected to the land of Canaan. So that's a milchemet mitzvah. You have no choice. That's your obligation within the course of history. However, milchemet reshut is a war fought for the expansion of territory. Could be necessary, it could be, something optional, but that's milchemet reshut. So the pasuk in Dvarim Perikav, the pasuk begins, Ki tetzei lemilchama aloivecha. Ki tetzei sounds like it's if you go out. It doesn't sound like you're obliged to go out. Although Rashi doesn't explain that particular aspect because Ki tetzei is a little confusing since it means something different in the beginning of the parsha of Ki tetzei, the next week's parsha. But this pasuk says Ki tetzei lemilchama aloivecha, if you go out to a war. V'reita sus, Rashi comments on the singular sus, barechev, and a chariot, amrav mimcha, and it may be a situation where the enemy is greater in number, mimcha, from your number that you see immediately. But the pasuk says, Lo tira mehem, ki Hashem elokecha imach, hamalcha me'eretz Mitzrayim, hamalcha me'eretz Mitzrayim. So we know that the words malcha eretz Mitzrayim are used in place of about Hashem, about God. Because you know that God is all-powerful, you know that God created the world, you know that God was responsible for Yetziat Mitzrayim, all of which indicates the authority that HaKadosh Baruch Hu has in the created world. So that's what it means. When the pasuk says, Hamalcha me'eretz Mitzrayim, it's a memory of the power of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, who is the creator, and therefore you shouldn't be afraid. But does it make a difference if it's a milchemet mitzvah or milchemet reshut that the pasuk has not yet told us about? Kikor el ham. So there's a story in the middle here about the Kohen and the place of the Kohen, in the war that is being undertaken by Bnei Yisrael. I assume we could all agree that the armies of those days were not constituted quite the same way as they are today. They're not constituted the same way that they are today. And they were sort of more ad hoc, what we call miluim today. Pasuk Gimel, V'amar lehem Shema Yisrael, atem krovim ayom lemilchama al oivechem, al yerach levavchem, al tir'u, v'al techapsu, Val ta'artzu mepnehem. So the pasuk says that the Kohen was there to encourage the people in the army, and says, even though you are going to war against the enemy, you should not fear what is happening and come to the wrong conclusion about the end of the war at the beginning. Hashem Elokechem Olechem Lechem Hilachem Lachem Im Oivechem Loshia Etchem. That God is there in order to fight on your behalf and to save you. Pasuk Hey, V'dibru Hashotrim El Ha'am, and then the officers in the ones who are in the army, in the king's army, V'dabru Hashotrim El Ha'am Leimor, and the Shotrim are the ones who say, Mi'aish Asher bara bayit chadash v'lo characho, who is the person who built a house, who started building a house, but didn't dedicate it as yet. He says, Yelech v'yeshov lebeito. He let him go home. Well, we're not interested in those kinds of soldiers who'll be thinking all the time of what they left behind. Pen yamut b'milchama, lest he is killed in the battle. And he imagined that somebody else will take his place. And that's kind of devastating psychologically. I mean, you don't want soldiers who are thinking about losing all the time. Pasuk Daled, Mia Isha Shed Nata Kerem Velo Chilelo Yelech V'Yashov Lebeito. If you planted a vineyard and it hasn't yet produced fruit, then he should also go home. So there's the person who built a house, the person who planted a vineyard, somebody who is engaged to a woman, but he hasn't married her yet. He should also go home, lest he dies in the battle. And somebody else will take her. So this mishtara, the people who are deciding who should stay back and who should come into the battle, are psychologically attuned, because they don't want a large number of these soldiers who go into battle to be psychologically unfit. People who would have difficulty understanding why everything that they built is being destroyed. Pasachet is v'yasvu shotrim l'daber al ha'am v'amru, and the shotrim continue, and they say something else. Mia isha yarei v'racha levav yelech v'yashov lebeito v'lo yimas et levav echav kilvavo. So here you have a clear statement. If somebody is frightened, easily frightened, and doesn't want to participate in the battle, he's afraid of it, he should also go home. We don't want him influencing. That's what the pasuk says. Lo yemased levav echav kilvavo. He won't weaken the resolve of his fellow soldiers as he has weakened his own resolve. Pasuk tet vaya kechalot hashotrim ledaber ha'am v'poktu sarei tzvaot b'rosh ha'am. Says when the shotrim finish, first the Kohanim speak to them, and then the shotrim speak to them, and then the Ramatkal comes, and he says, when the shotrim are finished, upaktu sarei tzvaot b'rosh ha'am. So they take over. The military chiefs take over from the civilians, the Kohanim and the Shotrim, who were there in order to encourage, even though some people are sent home, but they're basically encouraging an army ready to fight. Okay, So we have a background. I mean, all of these psukim are kind of a background about constituting an army. They didn't have a standing army that waited for some battle to take place, and during that time they could educate and impress the army with the fact that God would help them. But it's an ad hoc kind of army. Something happened. I mean, it's like the book of Shoftim. There was a rise in Avodah Zarah and idolatry. So somebody that was a charismatic leader who took them and made them into an army and fought against the people who spread idolatry in Eretz Canaan. So we're up to Pasuk Tet. We're up to Pasuk Yud, right? We now have an army. And then Pasuk Yet, Ki Tikra Bel Ir, when you in the army, I mean, who are we going to fight against? We go first to the big fortified city. Lilachem aleha. We want to fight against that city and conquer it. V'karata eleha l'shalom. The first thing that you have to do before you shoot your ballistic missiles, before the Teimanim do what they do, you have to cry out l'shalom, for peace. Now, what is that? What does that mean, that pasuk? So Rashi says, let me just get. Itikra el ir. So Rashi says, Kiti Krabeli, when you come close to the city that you want to override. So Rashi says, B'mil chemet harishut hakatuv medaber. So according to Rashi, Milchemet Rishut, an optional war, a war to expand your boundaries, but not a war for actual existence, for being alive. Milchemet Rishut hakatuv medaber. The pasuk refers to only Milchemet Rishut, that you have to call out b'shalom, but not Milchemet Mitzvah. Rashi continues and says, Kimo she meforash be'inyan. Right? There's another pasuk. Kei teitzei meforash be'inyan. Kei ta'aseh lekol ha'arim ha'rechokot v'gomer. The pasuk says at the end of this section, right? At the end of the section, the pasuk says, Kei ta'aseh lekol ha'arim. That should be the rule regarding kol ha'arim. Kei ta'aseh lekol ha'arim ha'rechokot, the ones that are far away. Well, if they're far away, it doesn't sound like a Milchemet Mitzvah. Milchemet Mitzvah is usually about the land of Canaan, the inheritance that we received, and the attacks on that inheritance. But if for some reason we can we can extend our military might to include places that are far away, well, then we have to potech b'shalom. So that shalom is sort of almost a counter-indicated to Milchemet Rishut. Rashi says this is that Milchemet Rishut hakatuv medaber. This is only Milchemet Rishut. Just finished the Chumash. Milchemet Rishut. Vayayim shalom ta'ancha. What does it mean to demand shalom? Vayayim shalom ta'ancha. That if the people in the city say, yes, okay, we want shalom, but chalecha. Im shalom ta'ancha, ופתחה לך, והיה כל העם הנמצא בה, יהיה לך למס ועבדך. Shalom meant that they would all live, but they would have a lesser status in the world. They wouldn't be, you don't want to integrate them. After all, they're all idolaters. Pasuk Yud Bet v'imlo hishlimimcha v'astaymo milchama v'tzarta aleha. If they don't want shalom, so you can go to war and place a siege upon them. Pasuk Yud Bet Unetana Hashem Elokecha b'yadcha v'kita et kol zechurcha lefi charev, and God will give you the victory. We go back to the beginning. Rak hanashim v'ataf v'hidbama v'kol asher yiyeh ba'ir kol shalala tavozu lach v'akalta et shalal oivecha asher natan Hashem Elokecha lecha. And so this is called war. War means there can be no peace. The people that, with whom you have no chance of making peace are severely punished. That's what the Psukim say. Psukim Yud Gimel Unitana Hashem Elokecha b'yadcha, and God would give them or put them in your hand. V'kita et kol zechurcha lefi charev. Zechura, you'll be able to destroy them, the city that you intended. But the reason for destruction is that you don't want to make shalom. When you don't want to make shalom, it's because the idolatry is tremendous, is part of the people. I mean, there's this kind of conflict that they recognize with the people from Canaan, who insist that there should not be idolatry. And that prevents them from agreeing for shalom. Rak hanashim v'ataf v'hema zechor asher yiyeh ba'ir kol shalala tavozu lach v'achalta et shalal oivecha asher natan Hashem Elokecha lach. And then there are laws of the battle, that victory is really about a certain kind of control. It's not about just murdering everybody in sight. Pasuk Tedvav Keitase L'Kol Ha'arim Ha'rechokot. This is the pasuk that Rashi quotes. Keitase L'Kol Ha'arim Ha'krovot. Ha'arim Ha'rechokot. I'm sorry. Mimcha Ma'od Asher Lo Me'arei Hagoyim Ha'ele Heina. So that pasuk Tedvav is the pasuk that indicates to Rashi that we're talking about Milchemet Reshut, because after all, the pasuk says Arim HaRechokot. Arim HaRechokot means that it's not just somebody who's on your border and confusing the people about Avodah Zarah, but it's something that exists. It's something that exists in a much wider kind of perspective. We're talking about the people far away who have other and there will be other reasons for attacking and maintaining the position of the battle. But we understand clearly that even though God promises to be with us in the battle, and that we know that we're going to win because we know about Yetziat Mitzrayim, nevertheless, our decision to go to war is modified by the decision to establish shalom. in the case of Milchemet Rishut, as Rashi says, we don't want to destroy. We want to make sure that the ideas that we base our existence on are not going to be jeopardized. So if we could do it by striking shalom, peace, with our neighbors, so we do that. And if not, then we have to go to war. But we understand that war is just a way of indicating our ideological preface and the absolute necessity that we have to remain devoted to God and to allow the power of heaven to dictate the way we go to war. And it was even going to war is something that people should see as being a serious matter. So that's what it says. That's what it says in the Chumash, with an addition that Rashi made. And now there are several other sources that I'd like to. First, something from Chazal, a source of the Tanaim. Here it is. You see, Dvarim Rabbah. Rabbah is the main Midrash Haggadah on the 5 books of the Torah. And this is a quote from Parshat Shoftim, Parsha Hey Siman Yud Aleph. Omar Rabbi Berechia, I'll underline it a second. Omar Rabbi Berechia. Amalei HaKadosh Baruch speaking to Moshe Rabbeinu. Vayecha. Vayecha means very. Something very important is going to be said. Sheli bitalta v'shalach chiyamta. Hashem says to Moshe Rabbeinu, there were cases where we were at odds. I mean, I'm adding that. And as a result of being at odds, Sheli bitalta, what I wanted, HaKadosh Baruch says to Moshe Rabbeinu, what I wanted, you did away with that. You didn't do that. But you did the way you wanted to do it. There were cases like that. Minayin. What are we talking about? What is Rabbi Berechia talking about? Shneimar. Vayoma Hashem salachti kidvarecha. We understand that after the Matan Torah, the Jews built the Egel HaZahav, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu at first was going to destroy Bnei Yisrael, start over again with Moshe Rabbeinu, Vayoma Hashem salachti kidvarecha. So Hashem said, let's do away with Bnei Yisrael. And Moshe Rabbeinu said, no, and pleaded for the continued existence. And finally, HaKadosh Baruch Hu said, salachti kidvarecha, which sounds like capitulation almost. So that's what Rabbi Berechia said. He said, Amalei, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Vayecha, Sheli bitalta v'shalcha kiyamta. Sheli bitalta means what God wanted, you did away with it. What you wanted, that's what we did. And the first example is salachti kidvarecha. Have v'tigzor omer. V'tigzor omer v'yakom lecha davar acher. I remember what v'tigzor omer v'yakom. It's okay. We'll go to the next case. Davar acher v'tigzor omer. Omar Rabbi Yeshua the Sichnin. That's where it gets interesting. It's Rabbi Yeshua the Sichnin with the Tana. And he responded to Rabbi Berechia B'Shem Rabbi Levi, Kol Ma Shegazar Moshe, Hiskima HaKadosh Baruch Hu Imo. Whatever Moshe Rabbeinu said, HaKadosh Baruch Hu agreed with him. Ki Kesad, Lo Amar Le HaKadosh Baruch Hu Lishvor Et HaLuchot. HaKadosh Baruch Hu never told Moshe Rabbeinu to throw down the tablets and to break them. Halach Moshe V'Shibran. Moshe Rabbeinu on his own, he decided to break the tablets, and he threw them down and broke them. V'Shibran Me'atzmo U'minayin She'eskima HaKadosh Baruch Hu Imo. So how do we know, Rabbi Levi, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu agreed with what Moshe Rabbeinu did? Dichtiv Asher Shibarta Yishar Kochacha Asher Shibarta. So the Chacham say the words in the Torah in parshat Ki Tisa, Asher Shibarta, the things you broke. That sounds like HaKadosh Baruch Hu is in agreement. It's okay. You broke the luchot. Yishar Kochacha Asher Shibarta. HaKadosh Baruch Hu Amar Le Sheyilachem Im Sichon Shene'amar V'Tgarbo Milchama, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu wanted Bnei Yisrael to go to war against Sichon and Og, the kings of Ammon and Moab. V'hu lo asakein. He, Moshe Rabbeinu, didn't do what HaKadosh Baruch Hu told him. Ela v'shlach malachim. I'll send agents to find out what's doing. Omar le HaKadosh Baruch Hu. God said to Moshe Rabbeinu, Kach amarti lecha lilachem imo, v'ata petachta b'shalom. Says, I told you to go to war, and you decided to deal with him b'shalom, and sent messages to tell him that if we just let us get through your land, we won't bother you. Chayecha. I promise you, Moshe Rabbeinu, that I, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, will do what you say. Kol milchama sheyu holchim lo yehu potchim ela b'shalom shene'amar ki tikrav el ir v'chulei. That's our parasha. So the example that is brought by Rabbi Levi about God giving in to, so to speak, to Moshe Rabbeinu is the battle against Sichon. HaKadosh Baruch Hu said, go to battle, go to war. And Moshe Rabbeinu said, no, we have to think about it. We'll send angels, representatives, who'll try to convince them that we can have shalom. So it would seem, it's hard to tell, is this story about, it sounds like, said Sichon Ba'og were on the eastern side of the Jordan River, that it would be more of a milchemet mitzvah reshut, that they went to battle against a milchemet reshut, that they went to battle against Sichon, but it was under direct command by HaKadosh Baruch Hu, so that would make it a milchemet chovah. So it sounds like even in the milchemet chovah, Moshe Rabbeinu decided that to liftach b'shalom. So we have two sources. We have the Tanaim, who seem to say that it was milchemet, even milchemet chovah. You should ask for shalom. Whereas Rashi seems to say that in milchemet reshut, that according to Rashi, if there's a milchemet chovah, that you have an obligation to go to war, then shalom is irrelevant. It's only in a milchemet reshut that you have an option, because you decided to go to war, so you have an option not to go to war. And that's what we learn. So we have Rashi's position, and now we have the position of Tanaim. Before we go on to the Ramban, let's just take a look at the Rambam. The Rambam in Ilchot Melachim, Perek Vav, Halacha Aleph says, Ein osim milchama im adam ba'olam ad sheyikrein lo shalom. For the Rambam, Koren lo shalom is a general obligation. It's always true. Ein osim milchama im adam. I mean, you could say there was no milchemet reshut option left in the world at that time in the Rambam. Maybe he had influenced him. Ad shekorim lo shalom. Echad milchemet reshut ve'echad milchemet mitzvah. So according to the Rambam, there's no difference in milchemet reshut and milchemet mitzvah. And we saw that the sources don't give us clarity in this matter. And therefore, I can understand why the Rambam might have decided that shalom was the overriding principle when it comes to milchama. Shenemar, ki tekrav al ir, lilachem aleha, right? Rashi's proof. V'karata ela l'shalom, even milchemet reshut. Im hashlimu v'kiblu, Sheva mitzvot shenitztavu b'nei Noach alehem. This is, of course, there are certain limits, but the important thing for us in this Rambam is that the Rambam uses the lack of clarity in the Chumash to produce a halacha which is very clear. And that halacha is that shalom is what precedes milchama. Every milchama has to be based on a desire for shalom, has to be based on the desire to change the face of the world, a world in which people are profoundly in disagreement with each other, to a world where people can disagree with each other, but that doesn't lead them to wars and to battle. So that finally, I'd like to learn a little bit of the Ramban on this same matter, on the same pasuk. The Ramban says, "Milchem reshut hakatuv medaber." It's not him; it's Rashi. K'mo shemefarash b'inyan pasuk kein taseh lekol harim harchokot. You remember, Mimcha ma'od l'shon Rashi. I hope you remember. Rashi says it's Milchemet Reshut that the idea of shalom enters into forces you to do something before you go to war. Katav Rav Zeh Misifri. And Rashi says it comes from the Sifri, Shinu Sham Kilashon Hazeh. במלחמת הרשות הכתוב מדבר, וכתוב ברבותינו בכתוב הזה, אינה אלא לומר שהפרשה בסופה תחלק בין שתי המלחמות. That this parasha, even though it doesn't mention the fact that there are two kinds of milchamot, reshut and chovah, that doesn't mention it at all. Nevertheless, according to Rashi, Al Pi Chazal, at the end of the parasha, it does. It talks only about Milchemet Reshut. Aval Kriyat HaShalom, Afilu B'Milchemet Mitzvahi, according to the Ramban. He said the Ramban doesn't understand Rashi. According to Rashi, the beginning of the parsha, which describes how you go out to war. Remember the Kohanim and the Shotrim and the people who are afraid and the people who are not afraid. So all that is preceding the war. I guess it precedes all the wars, Reshut and Chovah. But later on, at the end of the parsha, Pasuk Tetvav, it says, El Harim HaRechokim. So according to Rashi, the beginning of the parasha is about war. And the end of the parsha is about Melachamet Reshut, a special kind of a war. That says, Shiva Parasha Ki Echerem Tachrimem. And then it talks about at the end of the parasha what you should do. Below Techayekol Neshama. Aval Efreisha Beinehem Kasher Lo Tashlim Basta Milchama. The difference between them is that when they don't listen to you and they go to war, and you go to war in any event, Shetziva HaKatuv Berchokot Lakot Ekol Zichura Ulachayot Lahem Hanashim V'Ataf B'Zikarim U'Ba'arei Ha'amim Ha'ele Tziva Lachrim Gam Hanashim V'Ataf. So at the end, there's this obligation to wipe out all the people who didn't accept the shalom. And it sounds like you go to war and you say, if you want shalom, we're willing to take you up on it. We'll take you up on the shalom. But if they don't want shalom, that's an added reason to go to war and to actually be harsh. Shetziva katuv b'rchokot la'akot et kol zichurcha. When it came to those cities that are far away, we're obliged to beat on all the males. Ulachayot lahem anashim, and let the women live. At the top, bischarim, in the male children of Biarta. Uba'arei. Oh yeah, Ubigor Yerushalmi. Ubigor Yerushalmi. Amar Rabbi Shmuel Rabbi Nachmani Yoshua ben Nun Kiyem HaParasha Hazo Ma'asa Yoshua. And Yoshua was the one who carried it out, Ma'ita Sa Yoshua. Haya Sholeach, he sent Malachim B'kol Makom Shaya Olech L'chabosh V'aya Kotev Bat Ba Mi Shemavakesh L'chishlim Yavo V'yashlim U'mi Shemavakesh L'elech Lo Yelech Lo Mi Shemavakesh L'asot Milchama Yaseh Milchama. This is Yoshua ben Nun. Agir Nashpana Hagivonim Agir Gashi Agir Gash Agir Gashi Pana Hagivonim Sheshlimu Asalem Yoshua Shalom Shloshim Ve'echad Melachim Sheba'u Lilachem Hipilum HaKadosh Baruch Hu V'chulei. So the proof, according to the Ramban, the proof that Shalom had taken over Milchama, by that I mean that the idea that you can't have a Milchama of any kind unless Shalom is involved. In other words, Milchama, the way I understand it is that Milchama is a setback. Whatever it was that HaKadosh Baruch Hu thought that Matan Torah and the history of the Jewish people should achieve it, it did not wipe out Milchama. Chaim v'Hevel, the act of Chaim v'Hevel did not wipe out murder, but it made murder part of the reality. HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave us the option either to go to war or to make shalom. And that option exists even in Eretz Canaan, as Yoshua proved. Yoshua ben Nun, with all the cities that he conquered in Eretz Yisrael, Yoshua ben Nun sent messengers with the offer of Shalom. Shalom is the primary goal, according to the sources as I see them. Shalom is the primary goal, not victory. I mean, it's true that sometimes victory is necessary in order to gain the larger goals. But I think that we can see from the Psukim in the Torah, from Rashi, the Rambam, and the Ramban, and the Medrash, that says that HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave in to Moshe Rabbeinu. What does that mean? HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave in to Moshe Rabbeinu. It wasn't like they were equal footing somehow, and Moshe Rabbeinu convinced HaKadosh Baruch Hu of something that was unknown. That's not really what it means. What I think it means is that Moshe Rabbeinu adopted a position that HaKadosh Baruch Hu was in favor of. But the acts of emes and tzedek, because HaKadosh Baruch Hu was involved with the emes and tzedek of a particular situation, he had to tell Moshe Rabbeinu what he was up against, the destruction of Am Yisrael. But Moshe Rabbeinu argued the case, meaning he argued what HaKadosh Baruch Hu wanted him to argue, and that enabled HaKadosh Baruch Hu to say that divine justice is not meted out in cases where the people are unable to rise to the proper level. Rabbeinu was able, according to the Medrash, to convince HaKadosh Baruch Hu that even the war against Sichon V'Og, which was a Milchemet Mitzvah, HaKadosh Baruch Hu told Moshe Rabbeinu to go to battle against Sichon V'Og. You can't have a Milchemet Mitzvah that is more mitzvah than that. You see, Moshe Rabbeinu said, no, I've got to do shalom. I've got to give them the shalom option. And Yoshua ben Nun said, I've got to give them the shalom option, which should indicate to us that the higher level of existence is shalom, whereas milchama wrecks shalom, wrecks the opportunity for shalom. So I'm not sure that what we've talked about has meaning in the current reality. You could decide that on your own. But this is the basic material that we have collected on the matter of shalom and milchama. And I just hope that somehow we will find our way to at least part of the greater truth that we are dealing with all the time. Have a good Shabbos. Be well.